Welcome to Mystere Creations. Today our guest is Michael Hughes, a longtime magic practitioner and teacher. He speaks to us about magical practices and tarot and about keeping it simple and intuitive. We want to thank him for joining us and encourage you to read his books and check out his courses. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Doing great. Yeah. Love talking about magic, so looking forward to our conversation.
Excellent. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, well, I do a lot. I've always been someone who likes to try new things. So mostly I like to describe myself as a writer. I've got several novels published. Blackwater Lights trilogy is my series of novels, and it wraps all my interest in like weird stuff into one fun package. I've also written some nonfiction books. I have a book from Llewellyn called Magic for the Resistance. That book is available, or actually becoming increasingly hard to get a hold of. It's out of print. So if anyone wants a copy of that book, now would be the time to get it, because they're getting hard to find except on the secondary market. So I do a lot. I write about magic. I write about the supernatural. I write about psychedelics. I've always been drawn to like kind of the strange and esoteric. So that's what I write about. That's the most interesting stuff to me. And but I do a lot. I teach tarot. I have online courses. I teach tarot. So people who are interested in tarot, but they don't really know much about it, and it's very confusing, all the books and videos and things like that. So I teach tarot. I've been reading tarot cards professionally for most of my adult life, which is some time now. And I've always been into magic, and I love talking about magic, practicing magic, and just helping others learn how to do it and what it's all about.
That's wonderful. Um, what got you? When did you get interested in magic? Was it like right from the get-go?
Yeah, I mean, I've always considered myself a magical thinker of sorts. Like even as a kid, I'd play little mind games with myself. If I can kick this rock and four times and get it in that storm drain down there, then X will happen. Um, I just love I love the strange and the supernatural and magic and all that. I grew up in the 70s, so magic was kind of permeating culture at the time. I used to wait around excitedly for the next episode of In Search of with Leonard Nimoy. And it was just, also my father was real into strange stuff, so he'd pick up books like UFO books by Frank Edwards, and a lot of these. I mean, back in that pre-internet era, you absorbed things through books. I mean, it was the only way to learn about things, really. And the nice thing about that era is the strange and anomalous and paranormal was so pervasive that you could go to like a little drugstore and there'd be a rack of books, and you could just pick up a book on UFOs or ghosts or witchcraft and things like that. So it was of the time. The culture was just soaking in the strange and paranormal and UFOs and Bigfoot and all that stuff. Just it was pop culture. It was everywhere. Kind of like the renaissance of that a lot of these things are having now. But so it was just who I was. I also loved horror movies and scary stuff, and that often goes along with the occult and things like that. So for me, it's just who I can remember a time when I was not into this stuff.
Wow. It's been the same sort of thing for me. My mom taught me candle magic when I was 9. And
Oh,
so
cool.
basically from that point on, I'm in it. So it's been a journey.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us what your definition of magic is?
Oh man, this is always the hardest question, because I really think magic is a lot of things. I agree a lot with Alan Moore, who said art, I mean, paraphrasing him, but art is kind of indistinguishable from magic. They're very similar in the way that you can be moved to change by a great piece of art, or a song, or a concert experience. Um, to me, magic is, there's that old, there's the quote from Crowley that everyone throws around, and Dion Fortune, and that magic is changing consciousness at will, or magic is causing change and conformity with consciousness. And I think I like I like a mix of those definitions, because I believe that in order to do effective magic, you change yourself internally, and if it works, it can cause changes external too. So it feels like there's a direct link between the internal state and the external state. Again, that works with art. An artist develops this frame of consciousness where they can create some powerful art, then that art triggers the change in consciousness in someone else too. Like that's pure magic to me. The same with writing. When I'm writing fiction, it's almost like a dream unfolding in my head. And to me, the fact that someone else can be sitting far away in time and space and can enter that dream that I've created and experience it for themselves, that's mad. That's like pure magic. Like, it doesn't get more powerful than that. So, and it's, to me, the sort of the candle magic that you learned as a kid, or if it's like some super complex ceremonial magic, or if it's an artist doing painting something, and then someone experiencing a change in consciousness and emotional resonance from their artwork, or a writer who's creating this dream story that someone then participates in. It's all kind of the same to me.
That tracks with what my experience is. I do um enchanted paintings.
Oh,
I
wild. I
imbue
love that. I love that term.
I imbue the painting with part of me,
Mm-hmm.
the or what the intention of the painting is. Um, a while ago, when I was working with Marco, I
Mm-hmm.
did a spiral painting, and the best part of that painting was I'm still learning from it. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's I come to find out it's a retelling of a very old version of the Tree of Life. The spiral is the original Tree of Life, and what we
Mm-hmm.
know from the Golden Dawn and Crowley, the Kabbalic Tree of Life is very uh rational orientated rather than the spiral pattern of its origin. So it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting.
Um,
Yeah, I'd like to see some of your work. So I will do if you have some links or something, please
I'll
send them
definitely
along, or
share some.
post them in the notes, or yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Very cool.
Um, in your experience, does magic of place affect the outcome rituals?
I'm not someone who does a lot of magical work outside of like my space, my own personal space.
Mm,
I do believe places have energies. And I mean, we all experience that, when we go somewhere where we're just unsettled or uncomfortable, or a place on the opposite end of the spectrum that like infuses us with happiness and joy, things like that. So absolutely, I believe that. And when I have done magic in places that have felt powerful, like they contain their own energy, um, I absolutely believe that. I believe you could tap into that. I believe you can channel it. You can work with it. I also feel like it's always good to be respectful of the space that you're in if you're doing some sort of ritual. That's why, some of these like ghost hunter folks who, go into some place they're not familiar with and start doing some elaborate ritual. It just feels like, maybe be a little more respectful of the place where you are, maybe sort of suss it out. Um, and I have done some sort of impromptu rituals in really beautiful natural spaces. And I think that's a wonderful thing to do. And it really feels, there's a palpable difference when you're somewhere that has that sort of energy, that energy of place. So although it's not something I do regularly, I absolutely believe that's a thing.
Okay. I've found with certain places, like where I live on the island, uh, I'm on Vancouver Island.
Mm-hmm.
This whole island is like a nexus point of magical energies. And so basically, even in our home, it it's there. And
Mm-hmm.
so it tracks that you can use those energies for what you're doing, but also being
Mm-hmm.
respectful of the land, of the
Mm-hmm.
space that you're in. Um, One thing I learned in studying Thelema was that the whole sex magic angle of it, you
Mm-hmm.
have to be very respectful in how you approach doing that,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, and the entities that you're dealing with, because if you walk up to the door and knock on it and say, "Hey, wanna have fun," it's not going to work too well for you, I don't think.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, Thelema is not it's not, I don't practice it. I did recently read Marco's book, which I thought was fantastic. And I, I kind of, when people come to me and they're interested in Thelema, I'm like, get Marco's book. Like
Yeah,
that's the best way to start. So although I can't express any expertise on it, I rely on folks like you, folks like Marco, who are walking that path.
yeah. Well, so in your presentation at Strange Realities, you take a more eclectic, broader approach to magic. How, sorry, I'm going a little bit off the cuff here on you.
No, look all good.
Um, how how do you find working from a broader aspect? How does that help you on your path?
Yeah, well, my path is long and convoluted. um, I spent a lot of time doing, Kabbalistic magic in the Golden Dawn tradition, really, for many years. And for me, I had a sort of a a couple of like, eureka moments when I just realized that sort of path was not for me. One was when I met a rabbi at excuse me, at a Masonic event, and we were talking about esotericism and all that, and he I started talking about, well, I practice Golden Dawn magic, blah blah blah, based on the Kabbalah, and he just said, well, that's not really Kabbalah. And I said, well, what do you mean? Of course it is, because I'm going off everything that I've read for years immersing myself in this practice. And he said, well, that's Kabbalah as it was kind of interpreted by others, and Christians in particular, kind of, several Christian thinkers kind of appropriated it and started using it. So it really made me go back and reconsider what I was doing. And he said, if you want to learn Kabbalah, go find a rabbi that teaches Kabbalah, and go for it. So for me, it just felt inauthentic to be doing that sort of magic anymore. Plus, I was also kind of spinning my wheels. The Golden Dawn system gets super complex with all the correspondences, and it felt like I was doing more like intellectual thinking than I was actually doing practical magic. So what I decided at that point is I just want to start from scratch. Like, I'm going to like put on the brakes on all, I had all the tools, and I was doing all the elaborate rituals and things like that. I'm like, I'm just going to put on the brakes and study for a while. So I decided to do like a historical study of magic. So I started with the Mesopotamian, Egyptian, Greek, read the Greek magical papyri, and worked my way up through, the Middle Ages and grimoire magic and the Renaissance and natural magic, and also looked at magic of China and African magic and the African diaspora magic, like conjure and root work and hoodoo, things that had developed among enslaved people in the US. And what I realized, especially from that style of magic and folk magic, is that sometimes it's the simplest things that work the best, like the candle magic that you were taught as a kid. And that was my other eureka moment. Like, why am I spending all this time making these elaborate tools and sigils and talismans and things like that, and spending all this money at Michael's craft store, and spending all this time doing that when I could just write something on a piece of paper and light a candle, and that can be just as effective in that change of consciousness that causes change in external reality. So it was a big change in my approach to magic, but it's a change that and everyone is different, but it worked really well for me, and it completely opened a new world of experience in magical practice. And it's something that that I continue to learn. Like, I continue to learn from other cultures. I try to like understand what works. What are the through lines in all these different practices of magic? Like, what were they doing in ancient Egypt and Greece that is also being done in folk magic? Like, what's the template underlying magical practice cross-culturally and across time? And that's what I've been focused on learning and doing.
When it comes to working in the African traditions
Mm-hmm.
and other cultures, um,
Mm-hmm.
how difficult is it to not appropriate what they have and be able to follow the path that you want to to follow?
Sure. I think it's very simple. And if a tradition is initiatory, don't do it unless you're initiated in it. I mean, there are practical reasons why you shouldn't be trying to work with the Haitian Loa, and or deities or spirits or things like that from certain traditions, because you can really get into some dangerous territory. I mean, there are hot deities that you don't want to mess with unless you're fully prepared to do so. And whether you approach that from these deities are real, or whether it's just like a psychological process going on in yourself, there are reasons, there are initiatory traditions. They give you the tools and the knowledge before you just go jumping into this dark pool of water where you don't know what's swimming there underneath, and if there's something that might pull you down as well as try to pull you up. So for me, it's very simple. Like if a tradition says it is closed to outsiders and you need an initiation into it and you need training within it to work within it, then it's very simple. Also, it's just a gut feeling as well. Like that's why I'm not really a fan of like sage burning. It's that feels really yucky and appropriative to me. Like if you want to burn something to consciousness, if you want to burn something for purification, there are all sorts of ways to do that. I burn copal, I burn frankincense. There are traditions that have existed for millennia. And so you don't need to like go pull something from Native American spiritual tradition and use it. So plus, I mean, the idea, you always want to be mindful of where the source of the materials you're using comes from.
Exactly.
So for me, it's like, it's like a gut check sort of thing. Does it feel like you're taking something from a culture? Or is this something that culture has shared and said, sure, feel free to use this? And so you have to be very careful, especially with the type of work I'm doing, which does look at different traditions and pull, techniques from traditions. But the other aspect is don't call yourself a practitioner of something unless you're really part of it. I kind of frown on people who just deem themselves shamans. Like, oh, I'm a shaman because I trained at this workshop. Well, you're not really a shaman. I mean, you might practice shamanic techniques. You might, but if you've trained with an ayahuasquero or something like that, and you bring the medicine to people, sure, then claim that tradition. You've rightly done the work.
Yeah.
And it's so for me, it usually feels very clear. Those lines feel very clear. But for the most part, like if you feel called to Vodun or Santeria or something like that, don't just jump in. Like just research it, talk to people, and try to find someone who could train you in the particular tradition.
Also, make sure that you are able to have a really good relationship with that person. Is
True.
that I've
Yeah.
found?
I mean, yeah, I was going to say always vet your teachers. They're just particularly in occultism, there are some grotesque people out there. There are some cultish people. There are some, narcissistic sociopaths like anywhere else, but particularly in occultism, because it's, some people get drawn to occultism because they want power and they can feel power, they can generate power, and so it's really attractive to some deranged types. So you have to be extra careful, whether it's, a coven, whether it's a ceremonial magic group, whether it's a lodge of some sort. Just, trust your gut, vet people, ask around. Don't just jump into something and be swayed by someone because they're charismatic.
True. Be critical.
For sure.
Does emotions play a role in magical rituals? How important is emotional maturity in ritual magic? And would training, how would you go about doing some training that would help in that aspect?
Yeah, I think like anything, the more emotionally mature you are, the more grounded you are, the more psychologically aware. And like I was just talking about, being cautious. someone can be easily swayed in this stuff. And it pays to be, the more emotionally mature you are, the more effective your magic is going to be. I firmly believe that, other than like theurgic magic, which is magic you do to connect yourself with the divine. That's a great way to develop emotional maturity. I find that the longer someone does magic, the less they need to do like practical thaumaturgic sort of magic, like, oh, I want to do a ritual to get this or make this happen. The more magic someone does, I think they're naturally more aligned with the theurgic sort of magic, connecting yourself with the divine, elevating yourself, divinizing yourself, makes things happen naturally. And the sign you need to, when you first get started doing magic, you want to see results. You want to do the type of magic where I want to get this job and it works. And you go, yes, this stuff really works. And that's an important part of magical development. But I believe once you get deeply into magic, it opens aspects of yourself. If you're not becoming a better person, if your relationships aren't getting better, that's a sign maybe something's not working properly in your magical practice. And maybe you should focus a little more on yourself first. And I've been criticized by some people like, oh, this is just all self-improvement, new age, new thought, blah, blah, blah. But it's not really. I can say that my magical practice, the aspects that are focused on theurgic development, more connecting with the divine, more developing myself spiritually, things naturally happen better. It's almost like if you align yourself properly, the things that normally you would do magical rituals for in the world just kind of start falling into place. So emotional maturity is key. I think that developmental stage where you're just seeing if you can make things happen is very important to understand that, yes, this is real. What I'm doing is real. I'm not just LARPing. But ultimately, what I've seen in people who have developed themselves, it's really, I mean, ultimately, the real mystery of life is the self, is understanding ourselves. That's why outside the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, it said, know thyself. Like that's the process of entering the temple. That's the process of development, is knowing thyself. So the real mystery is understanding ourselves and our connection with everything else. So that's kind of a long-winded rant, I guess, but to me, it's very important that if you want to practice magic, you really do a lot of work on yourself. That's what Israel Regardie said about before starting any sort of magical practice, Golden Dawn or otherwise. Like get some psychotherapy, like understand yourself, because the better you understand yourself, the more effective you're going to be. Like magic becomes more than just making things happen. It becomes bettering yourself, improving yourself, and changing your consciousness in ways where you function more effectively in the world.
The more balanced you are, the better the outcome usually is.
Absolutely.
In Buddhist, before all of this, when I was around 14, I started learning about Buddhism because of martial arts. And I've trained in martial arts since I was 18 months old. So up until then,
Wow.
I was just physically there, but at that point, the philosophy behind it began to click.
Hmm.
And so Buddhist teachings actually really help to develop emotional uh, maturity, because they give you, if you've read any of Thich Nhat Hanh's books, he taught practical Buddhism, and he would teach techniques of dealing with emotion, particularly strong emotions, because his book, The Mindfulness of Happiness, was very instrumental in my path, because it came to me right at a time that everything was going wrong in my life, and I needed that pickup of, oh, this is how I deal with this.
Hmm.
And so, yes, train self training to better yourself is very important to any practice, no matter
Hmm.
if it's magical or otherwise.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. And you bring up something really interesting. I also uh, encountered Buddhism when I was about that age too. A teacher handed me a copy of Alan Watts' The Book on the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are. And it just kind of opened the floodgates to, I started reading about Zen Buddhism and Vedanta, Hinduism. And so, I went all out. uh, but I think you brought up something else important, and that's physicality. And so many magicians and witches and I've met have been very cerebral focused, and I think it's really important to have some sort of physical practice as well. I occasionally practice qigong, and I found that to be incredibly helpful in understanding like the energy in your body and how to manipulate and channel that energy and things like that. Same with martial arts. I mean, the whole it's that I think the Chinese system, based in Taoism, that became qigong and tai chi and things like that is really helpful. Or practicing yoga, if you're more drawn to yoga, something like that is really helpful in a magical practice. And I also encourage people to meditate. There's nothing I think better you can do for yourself outside of physical exercise than having a meditation practice. Certainly has gotten me through some tough times, just developing resilience and being able to enter a meditative state, just to kind of reboot your system and just learn to stifle the monkey mind chatter for a while is enormously helpful.
it's true. Um, Magical paths are individual. We've discussed that at length so far. Um, what's your advice for someone just starting out on their path, and how to discover different ways of getting into it?
Yeah, it's very individual. At this point in our culture, it really feels almost like an aesthetic. Like, what are you drawn to? I've never been like a real witchy person. That like I was not a goth in my formative years. I was kind of like more of a hippie punk. Uh, so, but a lot of people nowadays like are drawn to the witchy aesthetic. If that's what you're drawn to, try witchcraft. If you're more drawn to ceremonial magic, I think the best thing to do is just like look around and see what's out there and see what kind of tugs on you in a particular direction. Again, with caution and being careful, because there are plenty of grifters, as in every community. But just read a bit, like what draws you. Does recreating ancient Greek magic? Is that what you're drawn to? Were you always into Greek mythology? Look into that. There are incredible communities around working with the PGM and things like that, Egyptian magic. So just what draws you? What calls to you? What resonates with you as a person? And for some people, it might be just candle magic, like you said. I think, my wife's grandmother used to light a candle for everything. She was an old Jewish woman, but she lit that candle. If my wife was going on an airplane, she's like, I'm lighting a candle to keep that plane in the air and things like that. So you can approach magic as simple as that, as simple as a basic candle burning ritual. I also like, again, I'm a little prejudiced towards simple magic versus the really complex and ornate. I don't think you need to get, a piece of bronze and inscribe a talisman if you want to do something. If you like doing that, great, and go for it. But to me, just the getting a taste of your own power, getting a taste of ritual and how that can change your consciousness, just start simple and see, maybe you'll stay with simple forms of ritual and simple forms of magic. In that case, great, because you don't have to spend a lot of money. Candles are pretty cheap. A piece of paper is pretty cheap. Graveyard dirt, you can just go to your nearest cemetery with a baggie and purchase some graveyard dirt from whatever spirits you want. So for me, it's all about what calls to you, what resonates with you, what excites you, like anything else. It's like what kind of books you like to read. Some people like spy novels, some people like romances. Occultism is the same thing. You're going to feel energized by something in particular. That might be witchcraft. And if it's witchcraft, then you got to look at all the varieties of witchcraft out there. And also, I'd also tell people, like, just do a little work. Do a little work so you know that if you're thinking about joining a coven and they're telling you that their coven goes back to the Neolithic, a lineage from, the current high priestess back to the Neolithic era, that they're full of shit. And so
True.
just also know your history so you're not misled as well. But go for it. There's tons of magic ways of doing magic. Just find out what appeals to you.
Um, when just talking about this, one of the first uh formal, I to me I say formal, the first uh ritual that I remember doing was standing in front of a mirror and calling out my spirit animal. And and basically finding out who part of who I am in that process.
Mm-hmm.
That was just stare into a mirror, and the first animal that comes to you is your spirit animal. And it's very simple. And
Yeah.
the I've found the more simple something is, like in food, the more simple it is,
Mm-hmm.
the more it tastes better.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
with magic, the same sort of thing. More simple the ritual, the better the outcome, the more organic the process is. But when you get into uh, dealing with spirits and entities and doing ceremonial magic around that, a lot of that to me seems to be for show. It's
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing this grand gesture. It's meant for a group rather than the individual.
Mm-hmm.
And so it tracks. It's but the mirror one that stood out to me when you were talking about finding
Yeah. Yeah.
what.
And you said organic. I think that is a great word to use for that sort of ritual that just sort of comes to you.
Yeah.
And I would also encourage people, like, just learn to think magically. Learn to think, what if I look into a mirror and call forth my animal or my guardian angel or whatever, and just try things, be open to experience, but at the same time, be when you're doing the magic, believe in it fully.
Yeah.
But afterward, when you're evaluating it, be critical and objective and sort of rational. I think that's the way you avoid superstition, because the real rut that people can fall in, it's a terrible rut to fall in, is when you become superstitious and and almost schizophrenic in that, and I mean that in like the pathological sense, the psychological sense, when everything is a sign and everything has meaning. I've seen people get really messed up when they start thinking that everything is connected to their internal experience. So when you're doing the magic, inflame yourself, as Rigardi said, or as Mathers, or whoever it was, said, inflame thyself with prayer, like feel it. But then when you're not in that magical state, I think it's really important to sort of be as objective and as not skeptical in the debunker sense, but just like, oh, that was interesting. Yes, maybe that's a result of the ritual, but not seeing everything that's happening as a result of what you're doing internally, or what you're working is changing everything. It's a fine line to walk, and that's part of that psychological maturity as well. It's a razor thin line. Like magic is, you really need psychological maturity, or you can fall over the edge and have to struggle to get yourself back to where you need to be. But I love that idea of like organically seeing what comes to you and working with your intuition. And hey, maybe if I light this candle and I use this object, that might be effective, versus just trying to absorb stuff from books and doing things like other people have done them. I like that a lot.
Excellent. I think I, re having a good base in reading the books and getting to know what other people have done, that informs you about methods you could use.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes down to it, the ritual is like 1% and the aftermath is 99%.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I like that's why they say when you do a ritual, wait 3 days and then write about it in your journal.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Mm-hmm.
journaling is very important in magical work because we do change. Our thoughts and minds change physically every 7 years. In some
Mm-hmm.
cases, in 7 months, our body changes.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, that never invariably we're going to change in the process, and
Mm-hmm.
the outcome may not be immediate. It may be over a period of years or months
Mm-hmm.
or whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and so you won't know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's critically important to keep a magical diary, as I like to call it. And I'm currently working with some students now in a course I'm teaching with tarot magic. And that's one of the first things, like, get yourself a notebook and write everything down. Every ritual you do, every meditation, just keep notes, and you quickly learn that how important that is. I look back at some of my journals from, 10, 12, 15 years ago, and it's like, you're right. I'm a completely different person now, but I can look at that material and see what I learned from it. And sometimes shocking when I look back and go, wow, that's what I was thinking, or that's how I thought. But you also see the developments of like that personal development that I was talking about. It's just good to see how far you've come or where you've come, how you've changed, how you've developed. So yeah, I absolutely agree. It's critical to keep a diary of your working.
True, true. Um, with the technology like the internet, it's changing how people practice. For example, a ritual that is done with people around the world, say on Zoom, like we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
What's your experience with it, and would you like to see more experiments with it?
I have mixed feelings about it, honestly. The ritual that I'm most well known for is done monthly on the waning crescent moon at the same time by people all over the world. And I do believe in the power of people working together at the same time. I believe that creates a magical bond between the people. I believe it. I do believe in the power of concentrated many consciousnesses making change. But I'm also a little like, I don't like doing rituals with a glowing screen in front of me. I would much rather do something by myself, knowing that I'm connected to all those people out there. I feel like the screen, sometimes there's just enough screens in our lives at this point. It's
Yeah.
great when it allows something like this to happen, us to look at each other and have a conversation. It's great for things like that. But as far as incorporating in my, like, I would never use my phone in a ritual. Like, I've seen people doing rituals like reading off of their phones. That just feels aesthetically wrong for me. I, I think our phones are like some of the most powerful magical objects that have ever existed. I mean, I think we treat our phones as entities almost, and know when to say, okay, I've had enough of you. You don't belong here right now. Like, I'm going to turn you off. I mean, think about it. What did people do magic for? Like, they wanted to see what was happening in the distance. They wanted to locate something that was lost. They wanted to communicate somehow across vast distances. And a lot of times they'd look into a piece of obsidian, they'd scry. What are we doing now? We're looking into these scrying rectangles.
Yeah.
And it's doing all of those things that people had to rely on magic to do in the past. and that's a tangent I'm going off on there, but so I think we have to develop a relationship with these entities that are so present in our lives, always in our pockets, always in our hands. We're always flipping our fingers across, like doing magical incantations and things. So, as a long-winded way of saying, I'm not a huge fan of incorporating computers and technology into rituals. I feel like we do best when we turn all of that stuff off. They're distractions.
Yeah.
I don't need a glowing rectangle. If I want to scry, I have a beautiful obsidian, piece of polished obsidian behind me on my shelf back there. And I will, that links to my imagination. That links to my creative imagination and my deeper consciousness. Whereas that rectangle is controlled by whatever particular corporation, let's come through on the screen. So I'm not a huge fan. I'm fine if people like doing that sort of spell work connected. I think it's fine to do a ritual through Zoom. You're connected, so you can see the people from far away and work together. It's just not my thing.
Okay. The next question is about AI technologies.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that will change how people practice magic? Because for a lot of people, they have difficulty writing. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
writing a new ritual and use AI to help you at least get at least the outline for it, how
Mm-hmm.
will that affect your work?
Yeah, I am also ambivalent about AI. Sure, if you've got the basics of a ritual and you have problems writing, or you're dyslexic or something like that, I mean, you actually have intellectual difficulties putting something together, sure, use it as a tool to help you do that. But all I've seen AI do so far is disrupt, and do things. I particularly like, you talk about your art. I'm particularly um, not discouraged. I'm particularly pissed off, I guess, about AI sucking up everyone's art and then kind of regurgitating it, kind of spitting it back out. I'm not a big fan of that. I know a lot of artists, and I feel for them right now, knowing that people are like, why should I hire an artist for my book cover? I'll just have Mid-Journey or whatever crank something out. A lot of it looks a little um, samey to me too. Like, I feel like I can feel when something is AI generated. That will probably change as the technology matures. And I dislike the way it's kind of being pushed on. Like, every app that I use now has like an AI feature. I think it's in the same way that using a GPS all the time is kind of destroying the part of my brain that understands spatial relationships and eroding my muscle memory, I guess, my brain muscle memory of how to get places and which roads lead to which. And I feel like part of me is atrophying now because it's just so easy to turn the GPS on. I feel like AI is probably going to do that to people's creativity too. And also, there's already so much garbage online. I mean, now people are writing books with AI and flooding Amazon. So if it wasn't hard enough to find something quality to read when you're just relying on the algorithm, now you're just going to have these AI written garbage books, and they might even get readable. I'm not saying AI will not be able to write a passable novel, but I feel like that's just going to suck the creativity out of people. Work should be challenging. It should be challenging to write something. I've written 3 novels and a nonfiction book, and it's hard work, but it's valuable work. Like, going through those revisions, going back and forth with my editor about why something works or why it doesn't work. I never, like, the thought of taking one of my chapters of my books and feeding it to AI to have it make it better is just appalling to me. It's like giving up that magic that is creativity. So for simple things, yes, if you have intellectual challenges with putting a ritual together and making it make sense, whatever, sure, throw it into AI and see what it spits out. But even then, I would like to think that people would still need to put their own personal spin on something. So I'm very ambivalent about AI. I see where it could be helpful in scientific, medical progress, developing new compounds and things like that. But the way it's just suddenly everywhere, the way it's being suggested as a tool to do everything is a little disturbing. I think it's going to just continue the rot of people's minds and people's inherent creativity.
I've never
Mm-hmm.
used it in ritual other than Channelbot for Pennyroyal.
Mm-hmm. Sure,
And
sure.
that Channelbot it is a very odd device,
Hmm.
and it's kind of like Random Nautica. They're both in the
Yeah.
same vein.
Yeah.
They kind of
Sure.
they're magical, but they're part of the internet. It's weird.
Hmm.
Um, they
Yeah. I just, and since you mentioned that, like, I think Randonautica is a great example of using technology as like a divination tool or a magic creating a synchronicity creating tool. And it's based on randomness.
yeah
So I like that. What I'm not a fan of with AI is it's trained on just there's an algorithm. It's not random at all. It's it's built on an algorithm, and that algorithm is created by people. So I'm much more interested. Like I love the William S. Burroughs cut up technique as a tool of divination, as a tool of synchronicity generation. Anything that works with randomness, I can appreciate. But anything that's built on an algorithm that's run by some corporation in Palo Alto, I'm not so sure about. Like I feel like there's a contamination of human programming within it, and it's not random. It's like a advanced autocorrect, as some people say. That's what current generative AI is. It's just like it's a super pumped up autocorrect. It's just looking for the next series of words. And so yeah, but things like Randonautica, anything that works on randomness, I find intriguing.
when when it comes to uh Randonautica, I tend they you have the option to choose a parameter. I
Mm-hmm.
tend to not choose anything and see where it takes me.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And I've found more benefit from doing that than choosing an intention.
Yeah.
You choose an
Yeah.
intention, but then you're kind of creating mm, a parameter that takes away from the experience.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I find the same with divination. Particular, tarot is my tool of choice. I like to sit down and just let the tarot tell me what it wants to tell me. It's fine to ask questions, and when I read professionally for people and I teach my students, it's certainly fine to ask a question. That's an effective way to use tarot. But for me, the biggest mind-blowing moments come through when I just say, okay, what do you got for me? What do you need to tell me right now? What do I need to know? And those are the real so there's an element of that. Same with Randonautica. I do it the same way. And one of the first times it blew my mind, I just set a coordinate, went to the coordinate, walked around, and there was a glove on the ground. It was like a wooded area. There was a glove on the ground that had like red paint all over it. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. Resonant or whatever you want to call these things. So, wrote it down. So I told my friend about Randonautica. The same day he went out, he's like, okay, I'll download this and try it. He went out and he's like, you're not going to believe this. He sent me a photo. He held up a red glove that he had found. And like, okay, well, there's definitely something to this then.
Yeah.
And again, I think I feel the same with something like that. I'd rather let the pure randomness dictate the outcome versus me sort of trying to shape it in some way by saying, okay, I want to have I'll just add my own spin or desire on it. I feel like things are more magical when you just let them unfold of their own accord.
Organic again. Yeah. Organic.
Organic again. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yep.
What's your favorite tarot deck?
Oh man. I have probably 70 or so tarot decks. They're all on the shelf behind me. You can't really see it because it's dark back there. But I would say there are a couple. I actually have a couple handy nearby. Um, my all-time favorite, and the one I use the one I teach in my magic courses, is the Marseille, the Tarot of Marseille. There's the Pope card, which was turned into the high the Hierophant in modern decks. I love that deck. Um, or style of deck. Actually, I have several. So there's the Tower, from a different version of the Marseille. There's the Star. This is the Noble. This is one of the oldest Marseille decks. The Marseille is like a style,
Oh, yeah.
and they're what I like about the Marseille. They're historical reproductions, right? These are decks that were existed before the Golden Dawn came along and started claiming that the tarot is full of Kabbalistic symbolism and started stuffing all this esoteric cruft, I call it. So I teach with the Waite Smith deck, or Smith Waite, or Rider Waite, just because it's so ubiquitous. But I teach people to use that deck as sort of a set of training wheels. And then I say, work with the Marseille. Another deck I really love, this is the only like modern deck that I use. This is the Alchemical Tarot by Robert M. Place. It is a fantastic deck. It is so powerful. It's full of alchemical imagery, but it's designed as a particular symbolic system. Generally, I like the Marseille. The Marseille is devoid of esoteric elements. It's just what it was. It was not used for divination. It was a card game, but the images are powerful. I mean, tarot was a card game. Tarot was like playing bridge before the occultists got their hands on it and started turning it into a tool for other things. So for me, definitely the Marseille. And for people who are familiar with tarot, I really encourage them to like get a Marseille deck and start working with it. There's just something about it, something about that simple, almost primitive imagery is paradoxically more deep and interesting than later decks with all the symbolic, esoteric elements that were added to them.
Recently, I found a deck. It was randomly in one of these little card shops downtown,
Mm-hmm.
and I was walking by it, and I saw the image of a crow,
Mm-hmm.
and a raven on it, and I picked it up, and it felt right.
Mm-hmm.
One of those moments where, oh, I have to have this, and uh, it is very gritty. Like
Mm-hmm.
when you do a reading, it it doesn't pull any punches. It tells you how it is real quick, and
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like that aspect of it. But it's very in your.
That was the name of the deck.
It's I'll get it.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Huh. What's the name of it? I can't read the name of it though.
It's Murder of Crows Tarot.
Oh, cool. I love crows, man.
Yeah.
Crows are like my buddies.
Well, uh, my I always had animals when I was a kid, and
Mm-hmm.
this one baby crow fell out of a nest, and I picked it up, and I tried to put it back, but the mother rejected it, and so
Oh no.
I had to take it in and
Mm-hmm.
raised it and then released it because my dad said you can't keep it. You have to release it.
That's cool though, man. That's I mean, it feels wonderful to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's great that you've felt the empathy and compassion to do that. It's probably forged a bond between you and crows, I would imagine too.
It did, and I t My father taught it to say hello.
Oh, wild.
And so it would sit in the oak tree and say hello. And I don't know how many people that came into the yard would be looking around for someone, and he's sitting in the tree saying hello to them.
That is amazing. Wow. That's I know, I mean, crows remember human faces, and it's stunning how intelligent and capable they are. They're really powerful animals. I mean, if I had a power animal of my own, it would probably be crows. I collect their feathers. I used to live in a neighborhood that was swarming with crows, and I would just go out every day. There'd be another feather or two, and I just started every day. I'd grab the feathers and bring them in. I have a huge collection of crow feathers now, so
Awesome.
I feel you there.
The that and a white weasel. That was another one
Oh,
that
interesting. Huh.
that I had.
Huh.
It I named it Dermot because at that time it was Beastmaster was on TV. So so I named it after his ferret.
That's great.
But um so when it comes to divination, um
Hmm.
there's multiple tools. There's the Ching,
Hmm.
there's the tea leaf
Hmm.
reading. Uh,
Hmm.
tarot is your favorite. Um,
Yeah.
Dana Newkirk, the way she does
Hmm.
tarot is completely different than I've ever seen. She just takes the cards,
Hmm.
spreads them out, and then
Hmm.
randomly chooses. And I find that's kind of cool because then it's really random.
Hmm.
And the reading, you can kind of get that the reading is, like we said with Random Nautica, it's truly random.
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
Yeah, randomness is like key. I have sort of an equation I developed over the years when I talk about divination and when I teach tarot is randomness is plus intention equals randomness plus intention plus consciousness. You need to really tune your consciousness to the moment that you're doing it equals synchronicity equals outcome equals meaningful information. And I've struggled. I still am not sure how it works, but those are the pieces that are needed. So that's why different divination techniques work, whether it's tea leaves, whether it's runes, whether you're throwing bones, whether you're doing tarot or the I Ching. It's when you have those elements, meaning manifests. And I'm not quite sure how or why meaning manifest. I know many people have very strong ideas about it. I just I don't. I just know that it works. I've done it for so long that the magic is real of divination. And when we were talking about getting into a magical practice, I should backtrack and say that divination is usually the first step
yeah.
in a magical practice. So if you're thinking about a magic, like get a tarot deck, start doing the I Ching, learn some other method of divination, runes, whatever appeals to your aesthetic again. And that's the gateway. That's what opens the door to magic, because you see the reality of magical thinking, magical consciousness when you get meaningful information from randomness. And that's really step one.
Um, I the first divination that I ever did was I made uh, the first path I chose to actually pursue after learning from my mom uh, was the Druidic
Mm-hmm.
path
Mm-hmm.
because that's
Mm-hmm.
my heritage. I
Mm-hmm.
my the great portion of my family comes from Wales and England, so Druid the Druidic faith. Also, I have Nordic faith, so I have
Mm-hmm.
I have both. So it's runes and the Ogum sticks. I made those
Hmm.
myself, and making them myself, and they felt more powerful to me,
Sure.
but it was very hard to read them because I was just learning,
Hmm.
and it took a long time of developing an idea, an understanding of what the rune meant and what it
Hmm.
meant to me, because I'm not sure that the books that I was reading then were very authentic, and
Hmm.
so it was a lot of trial and error. Um, would you suggest to someone to make their own deck at some point once they've developed?
Um, I mean, sure, if that's appealing to someone, it's a lot of work. Um, and if you don't have a lot of artistic talent, for the most, I've never made my own deck. Like I've never felt the desire to do that. There's just so many incredible decks out there. And once I started working with the Marseille
Into
and earlier tarot, like historic tarots, it really became, um, you know, like I just like working with the reproductions of those decks,
yeah,
rather than like trying to draw my own. There's just something about them. Like a lot of people have come to look at the Marseille as like a real exemplar of tarot. And I found that to be true too. Like Alejandro Jodorowsky, cult filmmaker, wrote a book on tarot, which is one of my favorites, called The Way of Tarot, the spiritual teacher in the cards. And he's a huge proponent of the Marseille. I just feel like a lot of people I know that have worked with tarot for many, many years kind of coalesce around that. Like we sort of, we get started with the Smith Waite and more modern decks. But then once you get a taste of working with some of the older decks, there's really just something about them. It's kind of hard to really put my finger on it, but there's something very, very resonant, very, very powerful that just speaks to a lot of people.
okay. I I'm gonna have to get a deck and
Yeah, I have if you do, please let me know. I have a lot of really good resources
okay.
for working with it. A lot of people are just put off initially. They're like, well, this is just old, and that's not the Hierophant, it's the Pope. Why would I want a Pope card? Um, but it really helps you understand where tarot came from,
Yeah,
and to look a little deeper. I also feel like, especially with tarot, it's really important to learn the history. And that's why I teach the history first. And in both of my courses, Tarot Magic and just my foundation tarot course, like you need to learn the history. So
yeah,
you're not spouting off nonsense about how it comes from ancient Egypt, or it was an occult tool and it came before playing cards and all this stuff. Like there's just nonsense out there, along with things like you can't buy a deck, you have to be gifted it. There's just so much nonsense that learning the history will disabuse you of all of that. Like you won't fall for that
yeah,
garbage when someone says it to you. And like, oh, the tarot came from gypsies from ancient Egypt. No, it didn't. The tarot was a card game that was created in 15th century Italy for people to play games. That's what it was. It's not an occult tool. It's not an ancient fount of occult wisdom. It's just what it is.
yeah. I think anything that's out there, people will use as a divination tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
sure.
just a plain in I play Dungeons and Dragons.
Yep.
Regular deck of playing cards. We use those quite often in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
it's kind of they do like a tarot pull, and what's on the card is what's going to happen to your character.
Yeah, yeah. Like the deck of many things. I have my
Yeah,
D&D dice sitting right next to me, as a matter of fact. And I use my friend Sam Block, who's just a brilliant guy when it comes to geomancy. He said he came up with a way of using polyhedral dice for geomancy, for using geomancy, which is another, I mean, often neglected tool of divination that I think more people should try. It's just profoundly powerful tool. So yeah, people use everything. I have an old Mexican loteria deck. You can use anything, like anything that has images or symbols that you can randomize can be a tool for divination.
Yeah. We've touched on a lot of things. Do you have any practices that that really resonate with you? That what's your favorite in way of the non mainstream magical practices?
Sure. Well, I think anyone can develop a practice of magical thinking, and it's approaching life magically, as if you work, whatever you do, if you do it with creativity, spirit, deep engagement, imagination, it can become a magical practice. And that's why I always mention that Alan Moore quote about art being magic. And if you can make a meal magical if you put energy and thought and into it. So I think just about anything someone can do, they can imbue with their own form of magic. I love creative pursuits. I think my writing is a magical practice. I think it's one of the most powerful magical tools humans have ever developed. The fact that I could write something and you could read it 10 years later and be pulled into that imaginative trance that it creates. I like working with clay. I like making items out of clay. I like using items that I've made in my practice. So, but yeah, it's anything you do, if you do it with integrity and creative imagination and your own personal energy, can become a magical creation. So absolutely.
True. Is there anything we haven't discussed that you'd like to touch on?
We have covered a lot.
Yeah, we have.
Appreciate the opportunity, and your questions were fantastic and really opened a lot of doors for some interesting discussion. So I think we've really
Touched on
covered quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, is there anything you'd like to promote that's coming out?
Sure. Yeah. Appreciate the opportunity for that. Right now, I'm really heavily promoting my tarot courses. So there's a foundations course that's like learning tarot, learning the history, how to read the cards. It's geared for people who are either new to tarot or they've just been playing around with it, but they want to get a deeper relationship with the cards, get more experience reading. And it teaches a way that a method of reading for yourself and for others that is not really driven by memorization or book reading.
Okay.
It's more how to interpret pictorially what's happening before you. So it's a way of thinking. It's a conceptual approach to tarot versus this card means this card means this. You put this card here, you put that card there. So it's a way of learning your own path into tarot. So it gives you the tools to develop your own style. So I'm really excited about people who have taken it, have loved it, and rant and rave about it. And that course is like, it's over 12 hours of video lessons. There's a workbook that comes with it. There's all sorts of material. And there's a built-in community too, because I know if you're familiar with like what Marco is doing, Marco Visconti,
Yep.
with his courses, it's like a whole community built around it.
Yeah.
So there's a community built around this foundations course. But for people who are interested in, since that's what we're talking about, just a few months ago, I launched my course on tarot magic, and that is a self-contained magical system that's entirely based in tarot. So
Okay.
you can practice druidry, you can be a witch, you can not believe in spirits or believe in spirits. This is a technique that anyone can put to use. It's based completely in the tarot, the archetypes, the art, the symbolism, and the energies of tarot. So I think it's a great way for people to get started in magic and get a taste of what magic can do.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun. There's the best part of the course is a 22-week journey through the major arcana, where each week you're immersed in one of the major cards. The high priestess or judgment, or, so each card you live with for a week, like you're immersed in it. You're thinking about songs that relate to it. You're thinking about art that relates to it, books, characters, and it really deepens your connection. So it's a great course, I think, for people who already work with tarot, who but want to like add a deeper aspect to their practice. But it's also aimed at people who are just like, what is magic about? I'd love to try magic, but I'm not really into Wicca, or I might not be ready for Thelema, but I want to understand magic and what it is. And it's based around the tarot. So you can have another system that you like. You can even be a Christian and do this kind of magic, because it's based in the Christian iconography and the tarot, which was what the tarot was at the time.
Yeah.
So that's what I love about this course. And it's experiential. It's very hands-on. So you get to do magic, and you get to do different kinds of magic through different lenses, but it all comes back to the tarot in the end. So for me, it's really exciting. There's nothing else like it out there, which is why I'm like super duper excited to launch this and get people working through the system. So those are the two things I have to promote. If people like scary books, my Blackwater Lights trilogy is like supernatural horror. If you like that sort of thing, those are available from through Random House, but they're ebooks only. That's the one drawback to this, to that series. If people hate reading on a screen, but if you're okay with that and you have a Kindle or iPad, it's a really fun, scary series, like that sort of thing. But for right now, man, I'm really psyched about the tarot courses.
Excellent. I definitely have to check them out. And I will put them up on in the notes as well.
Cool. Appreciate it. Yeah, the courses that I teach, it falls under the umbrella of the Art of Magical Living. Focus on developing lots of courses, cover different aspects of magic, and that's called theartofmagicalliving.com. And that's where all the courses are housed. You can find the courses.
All right.
And you can find my books and all that stuff. I'm all over social media. I'm very easy to find.
Excellent. Thank you very much for coming on with me.
Yeah, wow. Thank you. It's been a super fun conversation. And
It has.
I was glad we could get together and have this time.
Me too.
This has been a production of Parasortium, a safe place to explore and create. You can support Michael by visiting his website, theartofmagicalliving.com. That's magic with a C. We want to thank him again for joining us. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe, and share this episode, as well as visiting parasortium.com and becoming a subscriber. Merch is coming soon.